Hey guys, and welcome to Graphic Designer Pro. In this video we're going to be running through our t-shirt design process, including how we set up our design files, research ideas, use specific design techniques, and how we export our artwork correctly for printing. You can also download our free project files from the description below. These include a couple of templates to work within, as well as a free customizable Photoshop mockup that you can place your designs into to see how they'll look on a t-shirt. If you enjoy this video, then remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more weekly design content. Okay, let's head onto the computer now and get started. Okay, so before we start designing anything, the number one thing we have to do is check what our printer's specifications are. Now, unfortunately, there's not just a blanket one-size-fits-all set of guidelines for this. You really have to check with whoever you're getting your t-shirts printed with, as every printer varies and has their own way of doing things. So most major printers online will have a dedicated page to their print specifications. If you're using a local printer, for example, you can always get in touch and they should be able to tell you how you should set up your artwork, what colour spaces to use and how to export it, and what file types they want provided. So there are absolutely tons of options for getting t-shirts printed nowadays. If you simply Google t-shirt printing, you're going to get so many options popping up. So we've just handpicked a couple of well-known examples, starting with Redbubble here. You can basically get your designs printed on a number of different products, one of them being t-shirts. We've got their page up here on their print specifications. So this will include things like dimensions. We've also got the file types that you need to export to and color profiles. So if we click on dimensions, for example, they obviously have a range of different products, even just for apparel. We've actually set up our Illustrator and Photoshop free templates that you can download as part of this video at their recommended size for men's graphic t-shirts. But in this case, and this is the case with a lot of these larger print companies, they will actually have a stage where you can preview, resize and position your artwork before actually confirming it. So having an image that's too large instead of too small is much better when it comes to print. We don't want anything that's going to have to get scaled up and lose quality and start to pixelate. Now, interestingly, Redbubble only specify to upload common raster file types, so JPEG, PNG and GIF. Now, a lot of the time in print design, it can be a good idea to export to vector file types as they are scalable and they're not going to lose quality as long as you don't have any raster images within them. But in this case, that is not a requirement, and this is a perfect example of checking these requirements first. You could go to another printer and they may tell you that they can only accept a vector file type depending on the print processes they're using. If it's traditional screen printing, this can make their job much easier. If we look at color profiles as well, they are requesting that you design in CMYK. This is very common for print, and it's going to ensure a closer match to what you see on screen to the final printed result. If we now go over to Merch by Amazon, this is another option for printing and selling t-shirts. They have some slightly different requirements. So let's jump over to their best practices page. This is actually a really useful page to look at as they go into quite a lot of detail about what you should and shouldn't be doing with your artwork. So contrary to Redbubble, they are actually requesting that you create your final artwork in RGB as it will have a greater range of colors. Now this is definitely the case. We can choose way more vibrant colors with the RGB color spectrum. Interesting to see that. They're also specifying PNG here, although they're not saying that that's the only file format you can upload, but I can't see anything else about other file types. So I would assume that you're best uploading a PNG. Now if we scroll down here, they have some more information about how to set up your artwork. One of the most important things is when it comes to transparency. So if you're creating artwork that has transparent areas, for example, like we see here, the final printed result isn't necessarily going to look how you're seeing it on screen. So this is a perfect example. It's more of an issue on darker t-shirts, but Amazon are specifying that they have to put basically a white base layer down first so that the colours that get printed on top of that stay vibrant and don't just blend into the t-shirt material. So we're going to cover a few techniques to combat this when we go on to Illustrator and Photoshop, but this is just something worth noting. They also detail things like how to get a true black with your print as well. Some more information here about how your designs may print versus how they look on screen. So this is a really good example of a print specifications or best practices page to look at. Another thing you want to be careful of is how small you make your type and the line weights you're using. If there's any fine lines or details in your designs, they may just fill in or get lost. So this is another very important thing to check. Again, if you're using a local printer who doesn't have a resource like this, just speak to them, maybe get a proof design printed first so that you can see how it's turning out before you then go and bulk order, for example. They also have a list of do's and don'ts at the bottom, also very useful. And if we go to their next page, they also have some actual design templates already set up for you to download. So this makes it even more simple for you to make sure that you're setting up and exporting your artwork correctly. So jumping into Illustrator, this is an example of one of their templates. They've actually got some supporting text on the left hand side, which is very useful as well. And over on the right hand side, they've got the artwork area all set up for you. And what's even better about this is we can actually preview this on a t-shirt. We've got this kind of mottled t-shirt material look in the background as well. If I go over to my layers panel, we have a colors layer and we can actually change the color of this t-shirt so we can preview it on different colors, which is a really great idea. We also have product outlines, so we can actually change which type of t-shirt we're looking at, so we can choose smaller t-shirts. We can also choose things like long sleeve t-shirts as well. Really great idea. I love this from Amazon. I think this is a much better way to do things. By contrast, on Redbubble, I couldn't actually find any design templates. I found a few simple mock-ups, but not really that useful for designing your artwork. So like I say, we've set up a template for Redbubble. I'm just going to close this Amazon one. We have this set up right here. You can download this from the description below and you'll be ready to start designing within this template. Now, if you're wanting to set up your own files from scratch, if you're using a different service provider, for example, it's very easy to set up a document based on the print requirements you've been given. So for example, I'm just going to go up to File, New, and this is the same in Photoshop as well. Now from the off, we can choose between web and print presets, but really we just need to focus on the information on the right hand side. So some printers may specify their artwork dimensions in pixels, others may use inches. That's very common in America. Here in the UK, we tend to use millimeters a lot when it comes to print, so we can specify what units of measurement we're going to use here, and we can simply input the required values in these width and height boxes. Further down, we've got our color mode. So if we're designing for someone like Redbubble, they specified CMYK, so we can select that from here, and that's going to ensure that we're not creating any colors that are too vibrant to actually be printed using the CMYK process. We also have our resolution for raster effects. I would always recommend keeping this at 300 pixels per inch to get the most detail out of them. Again, this is important when it comes to printing, and I can simply go ahead and click create and we'll be good to go. Now I've actually set up a few designs already that we're going to run through, and on the topic of actually designing for your t-shirts, this is a huge topic in itself, and it really comes down to your technical ability and what you want to create. So before I start any design project, I find it crucial to do a bit of research and gather inspiration first. So even if you just jump on a website like Pinterest, I've done a search here for creative typography, and just look at the range of things on offer here. I'm not saying to go and copy people, in fact that is the exact opposite of what you should do, but this is a great way just to gather inspiration, get inspired, and maybe put your own twist on a style that you like the look of as well. You can take elements from a design and try and make them your own. So this is always a great place to start. There are so many different types of t-shirt design. If you're an actual graphic designer, it's much more likely that you're going to be creating something with eye-catching graphics, illustrations, custom typography, that kind of thing. So definitely immerse yourself in these kinds of designs, gather some ideas. Another fantastic idea is to actually create some sketches based on what you've gathered, and this can be especially useful if you actually want to create a quite hand-drawn looking design. design. If you want to know how to convert sketches into a vector design, check out a previous video that we created on converting images to vector designs. It has lots of useful information to do that, and we don't really have time to go over those details in this video. On that note, I'm not going to sit and design something from scratch here. That's just going to take too long, and really there is so much variation in what you can create for a t-shirt. So looking at our first example, we've just created a fictitious clothing company here called Umbra. We've got a simple logo design, and really logo design has a lot of crossover when it comes to t-shirt design. If you've got a client, or even if it's just a personal project, you may want to start your own clothing company, for example. Creating a solid set of branding is really going to help when it comes to creating t-shirts. So we've got a simple logo here. It could equally be for a client who wants some branded apparel, and really a lot of the time all they're really going to need is their logo printed on a t-shirt or workwear, for example. So this can be a great starting point if you want to try some t-shirt designs. So we've got this simple vector logo here, and I always recommend working in vector if you can. It is completely scalable, and more often than not printers are going to prefer working with vector outlined artwork like this rather than raster graphics that can be poor quality or can be harder to separate when it comes to the colours, especially in screen printing. This can be a bit of an issue. Now, if you want to know more about the specific printing methods when it comes to t-shirt design, let us know in the comments down below. That's again a whole topic in itself that's going to take too long to go through in this video, but can equally be very useful to know. So if you want to know more about that, let us know in the comments and we will make a separate video on that. So if you are designing for a company that just want their logo featured, it can be a good idea to create a few different versions of the logo. So we've got this one. This is going to work well obviously on a white t-shirt. It's going to stand out, but if you wanted to print this on a darker t-shirt, that's where we might want to create a few different versions of this. So I'm just going to create a duplicate off to the side here, and this is just a very simple example of just converting the darker areas to a lighter color. So I can double click into this group, we can select some of these darker elements, and I could just switch these to be white. That would be a very simple way of doing this, and that's going to stand out much more on a dark t-shirt. Now in this template file, we obviously have this artboard set up, and this is what we're going to be exporting to then upload to a website like Redbubble in this example. So we want to make sure our artwork is sized how we would want it on the t-shirt. And now obviously it's a little bit difficult to tell because we're just looking at a rectangle here. It's not really giving us the full picture of how it will look on the t-shirt, but like I say, we can basically resize this and reposition this on a website like Redbubble. So it's not a massive issue in that case. What I would recommend doing is just making sure that you've got this scaled up nice and big. Even if you don't want it that massive on the t-shirt, this is just going to give you more room to play with when it comes to uploading it, especially because in this case we're going to be exporting this to a PNG file. Now the reason to export it as a PNG is that we don't want a white box sitting in behind this design when we upload it. If we want to apply this to a light grey t-shirt, for example, we don't want a big white box in behind the logo. If I drag this off to the side, obviously there's nothing in behind this. If I was to export this as a JPEG, it would automatically create a white background for it because it does not support transparent backgrounds. But from Illustrator, it's super easy to export this as a PNG. All I need to do is go up to File, Export, Export As, and from my format drop down you can see we have a bunch of different file types. Obviously in this case I want PNG. Make sure to check Use Artboards, and that's going to export the full artboard. It's also going to avoid exporting anything outside of the artboard like we have here. So I can just simply click Export, but I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, also making sure that my background color is definitely set to transparent. You can see we can actually specify this to be white or black, but in this case we do not want that. So I'm going to click OK, and that will now be ready to upload to Redbubble. Let's look at another design example, and this is something that I really like to do if I'm working with a brand and a logo, is to create a much more simplified badge type logo, something minimal that can basically be positioned up in the top right of the t-shirt. And this is what you're going to see a lot when it comes to logos. One thing that we always want to make sure before we export is that we outline any text or strokes. So we have this live text here. You might have this set up so that you can go and change the fonts or sizes, but before exporting, it's always a good idea to convert this to outlines, especially if you're exporting to a vector file format. Again, this can be crucial when it comes to the printing process. So with this selected, selected, even though it's grouped with these other elements, I can simply go up to type and then down to create outlines. I also like to do this with any paths with a stroke. So for example, if I had some paths in here, let's just apply a stroke to this very quickly, just as an example here, bump up the stroke weight. I would also make sure that I outline this stroke. So at the moment, if I go to my outline view, you can see this is just a single path here. I can go up to object, down to path, and then outline stroke, and that's actually going to outline this so that we've got a path around the stroke that we've just created. Again, this can be a requirement of some printers. So like I say, before I export artwork like this, always make sure that your fonts are outlined and your strokes are outlined as well. Now with something like this as well, as we looked at in the last example, it can be nice to have a few different variations, especially if you're doing a line of different colors and options. So what I like to do is just create a few duplicates, for example. What we could do is grab our ellipse tool and put a circle background in behind this. So I'm just holding Shift and Option or Shift and Alt to drag out a perfect circle from where we clicked. I can right click this, go to Arrange, Send to Back, hover over here, we get our original design, and I could flip this to be white instead. I also want to make sure that this is definitely centered against the circle we've just created, and we've got a completely different looking design. Equally, I could create a version that doesn't have a circle in behind it, but if this is being used on a darker t-shirt, we've got that ready as well. You might also want to create a color version, so we could grab our circle in behind and give this a new color. Let's go with something quite vibrant here. Could equally do a version without the circle in the background and we could match that color. So it's great to create lots of different options like this. It gives you a little bit more flexibility with the different colors of t-shirt you can print on as well. And you see tons of big brands doing this, just simply switching up the color of their logo, for example, to work with a certain color of t-shirt. So I think this is a great idea. Obviously, when you come to export this, you want to make sure that you've only got one design on the page here. So if I just wanted to take one of these designs, let's just move the other ones off the artboard. I'm going to center this against our artboard here. I can make this bigger as well, make it nice and big, and we can always resize this at the review stage, and I can go and export this now. So that's just another type of design to consider. Let's move on to another example here, and with this design we now have some transparency to deal with. So a design like this could cause headaches when it comes to the actual printed design, especially if it's on a darker t-shirt. If we move this across, the areas that are actually transparent may actually appear white on a darker t-shirt. So how can we combat this? Well, my favorite technique is to use halftones, and I actually really like the look that this provides as well. It's actually quite different to what we're seeing here, but I think it gives a really nice aesthetic for something like a t-shirt. So in Illustrator, we can do this simply with our design selected. I can go up to Effect, down to Pixelate, and then Color Halftone. So we then get this dialog box popping up. We've already set up these settings so that it's going to work for this size. You may need to play around with your max radius value depending on how detailed you want this to look. In terms of the channel values, I would recommend that you keep all of these at 45, as this will give you the cleanest looking halftone. You can change these values, but you have to make sure that all channels are the same value, otherwise you'll start to see the CMYK channels at different angles and it doesn't give you the desired effect. Now if I click OK, this effect isn't actually going to work on this example. So if I zoom in here, we're not really getting a proper halftone effect, and the reason for this is because we are going from a 100% opacity color to 0% opacity, and for the halftone to work properly, it has to work with two full 100% opacity colors. So to change this, I can simply just go to my gradient panel. I'm going to go to the color that's set to 0%. Let's bump this up to 100%. And what I can do is, because this is on a white background, let's double click into here and change this to be white instead of the blue color. And you can see this is working much better. To get an even better result though, I would recommend swapping out any color to be pure black. And you'll see what I mean. If I double click on the blue swatch here, let's change this to be a black color. And what that's going to do is get rid of any of the white areas in the sections of your design that you actually want to be a solid color. Now, obviously we are getting rid of the color, which you may not want to do. Another issue is that if I drag this off over a darker color like here, you can see that we don't actually have a change in transparency. This is now just fading to white, which is not what we're after. So what we would need to do is basically image trace this, so we can actually convert this back into a vector. So to do that, what we need to do first is go up to Object and down to Rasterize, and this is actually going to convert this from vector paths like we have here into basically a raster image. So make sure that your resolution is set to 300 pixels per inch, CMYK, that's all good to go, so I can just click OK. Now if I go over to my properties panel, I can go to image trace and I'm going to select black and white logo. Now if you want to know more about using the image trace feature, again check out our video on converting images to vector. That's going to give you way more detail that we don't really have time to go over in this video. So I'm just going to tell it to ignore the white areas, and I can also play around with the threshold to either reveal more light areas or more dark areas. So this just takes a little bit of trial and error, and I can go ahead, click expand, and we now have a new vector design which I can go and add color to if I want to. So I could just click a blue color for example, and there you have it. Fairly easy to do, and this is now ready to export. We're still getting that idea of transparency here, but if I drag this over a darker color, we're not getting any white in there. This is ready to be printed. Now reverting back to what we started with, we can also do this in Photoshop. So let's just copy this over with Command C or Control C on a PC. Let's jump over to Photoshop, and we've also set up a Redbubble template on here as well, so this will also be included in your download. I'm just going to press Control V or Command V to paste this in. Pixels is fine, we don't need this to be a smart object really. And when you're working in Photoshop, this is where creating things at the correct size is much more important. If we create things too small, we can't then scale them up without starting to see individual pixels, which isn't what we want. So always make sure that you're designing at a decent size. Obviously we have this template set up, so this is giving us a good indication of how big to make our designs. So I'm going to keep this quite large. Let's hit enter, and the same rules apply here. So in Photoshop, I can go up to filter, and if I go down to pixelate, we have the same color halftone option, and this works in the exact same way as it does on Illustrator. Now we actually have a few more halftone options in Photoshop. The one that we want to access actually sits within this filter gallery option, which is grayed out, and the reason it's grayed out is because this document is set up at CMYK, and for some reason certain filters don't work in CMYK. So what we can do is go over to image mode, and I'm just going to change this to RGB. I'm just going to click don't merge, and if I go up to filter now, these are now available. So really, when we're designing initially with color, make sure that your documents are set up in CMYK, but it's not an issue to then convert it to RGB to do something like this. And as we'll show you in Photoshop, we actually need to convert to RGB before exporting to something like a PNG. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's click filter gallery, and under sketch over on the right hand side, we have a halftone pattern option. Now I've already got this set up. You can play around with the size and contrast sliders. We can actually change this so it doesn't have to be a traditional halftone dot pattern. You can see we have this set to circle. We also have a line option, so this is just going to create horizontal lines to create this effect, but we can get a little bit more creative with this. And in general, Photoshop can be excellent for creating slightly more creative looking designs. We can be a little bit more free form with some of these effects, so definitely give it a go. I'm going to go with something like that and click OK, and this is the result we get. One other option is to use the bitmap settings in Photoshop. So I can go up to image, down to mode, and what I need to do first is convert this to a grayscale document. So that's basically taking all the color profiles away, that we're only working in black and white now. Now I can go up to image, back to mode, and we now have the bitmap option available. So if I click this, it's going to actually ask us to flatten the layers, so that's fine, it doesn't matter in this example. Make sure that your output is set to 300 pixels per inch again, and under method we have a few different options to choose from, but if you choose halftone screen, click OK, we're going to get a few more options here as well. So similar to the effect we just looked at, we have a few options to choose from, so we can select the traditional round halftone dots. Again, we have a line option, which is what I'm going to select here. I'm going to set my angle to 45 degrees again, and we can change the frequency of the lines. This is something that you may need to play around with to get the desired look, but if I click OK now, you can see the kind of effect we're getting. Now the only issue here is that we've got some lines appearing in the dark areas that we may want to be solid. So what I like to do is just press Command A or Control A on a PC, Command C to copy this, and then Command Z to go back a few times. You may have to press it a few times. So we're back to our original design. Let's add a new layer and then press Command V to paste our new halftone effect in. And what I can do from here is just click my layer mask shortcut, and I can basically just mask out any areas that I don't want, so we can reveal more of that solid black color in here. If you don't know about masking, then again, this is something we're happy to make a separate video on. It's too big a topic to cover in this video. A lot of what we're discussing here just comes down to design experience and ability, and it's going to make a huge difference when it comes to creating t-shirt designs. So we have this halftone design. Now the only issue we have from this point is the fact that it's again on a white background. So if we want this to be a transparent background, we've got a bit of an issue. Now luckily there is quite a useful hack for this. What I'm going to do is just flatten all of these layers. So I'm just going to click flatten image like so. Now what I want to do from here is make a selection of this whole layer. So Command A or Control A, that's just selecting the entire layer here. Then I'm going to copy this, so Command C, and we can deselect this with Command D. Now what I want to do is create a new layer, and I'm going to grab my paint bucket tool, make sure that your foreground color is set to black, pure black, and then I'm just going to fill this layer with pure black. What I can do from here is just delete our original layer, and with our new black layer I'm going to add another layer mask here. If I hold Option or Alt on a PC and click on the layer mask thumbnail in the layers panel, we basically go into our layer mask view here. From here I can simply paste in our copied selection, so Command V to do that. I'm going to deselect this, and all I need to do from this point is go up to Image, Adjustments, and then Invert. So what this is essentially doing is creating a layer mask on this black layer. If I simply click on the layer again, this is what we're left with. So we actually have transparency in behind. The only issue that you can run into is if you're not dealing with a pure black design, you can see this is slightly transparent as well. So a quick way around that would be to hold Command or Control on a PC and click on the layer mask thumbnail again. That's basically going to make a selection. Make sure your foreground color is set to white. Let's go up to Edit, Fill, and make sure foreground color is selected and click OK, and that's basically going to convert that to be pure black. Now if you want to add some color back into this design, we can simply apply this to the layer we have here. I could either use my paint bucket tool and drop in a new color of our choosing, or I could double click on the layer to open our layer style dialog box. I could go to color overlay for example, or I could even use a gradient overlay if I wanted to do that instead. So it's very easy to add this back in. One thing to note is if I just stick on color overlay, let's double click on the color option here, and I'm going to pick a bright red, and you'll see that this isn't working, and that's because we're still in our grayscale color mode. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. Let's go back up to Image, over to Mode, and because we're dealing with color again, let's switch back to CMYK. We're going to get a warning here just to say that it's going to convert the color profile. That's fine, hit OK. I can go back into my color overlay options. Let's choose a different color. We'll choose a blue, click OK again, OK once more, and we now have color applied to it. We've still got our transparency though, so this is good to go. Now, as I was saying before, if we want to export this as a PNG, because we're in the CMYK color mode, we're not actually going to be able to. So if I go to File, Save As, if I go to my format drop down here, you can see we don't get a PNG option. So I'm just going to hit cancel. All we'd need to do is go up to Image, Mode, RGB color, and you'll see our color hasn't really shifted. But now if I go to File, Save As, now if I go to my format drop down, you can see we have way more options, but PNG is one of them. So I can select that and go ahead and click Save, and that's going to export the whole canvas here with our transparent background. I'm just going to hit cancel though. Now let's just jump back over to Illustrator for one last example. Let's go to our layers panel, turn this off, and we've got one more design here. So this is another example of a graphic that you might see on something like a t-shirt. Let's just center this, we'll make this nice and big. Now something like this is great potentially on a white t-shirt. Again, this is appearing nicely here, but on other colors, say it was an orange t-shirt, certain elements might not stand out that well. This is especially the case if you're dealing with lots of colors within your design. designing. So a good way around that is to use an offset path with a white background in this example. So similar to what you'd see with something like a sticker, this is basically just creating a path around our design slightly offset. That means it's going to stand out on lots of different colors. So I can select the whole thing, it's all grouped together, go up to Object, down to Path, then Offset Path, and we can specify a pixel value here. I'm just going to bump this up until everything's nicely covered. You can make this quite a large size if you want. Let's go up to about 38 pixels, and I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to go over to my properties and just use the Unite Pathfinder option, and that's just going to merge all of these shapes together into one big shape. Now from here, I like to cut this away, so Command X or Control X, and the reason is that when we create offset paths, it sometimes groups with certain elements. So I prefer to cut it away, and I'm going to paste it back in place with Command F or Control F. And the last thing I want to do is right click, go down to Arrange, and then Send to Back. And I can change this to be a white fill, which is great. And now this means if I were to drag this over this background, for example, you can see that this is still standing out nicely, and you're not going to have issues on different colors of t-shirts. So that's another option to consider when you're creating your artwork. Now, one other thing we've provided is a free t-shirt mock-up so that you can roughly see how these would look on a t-shirt. So I'm just going to press Command C on this. Let's jump back over to Photoshop, and we have the mock-up open here. Very simple. This is purely for reference so you can see how it's going to look. Don't ever send final artwork in a format like this. This is purely just a referencing tool. You can send this to a printer for them to reference as well to see what you're thinking in terms of the positioning and scale of it. It can be useful for them, but this is never going to be usable as final artwork. So over in the layers panel, you'll see we have a layer here that says your design here. If I simply double click on the thumbnail itself, this is going to take us to a separate PSB file. If you're not familiar with mockups like this is just a simple way of placing in your artwork, and it's going to automatically get applied to the t-shirt in this case. So I'm just going to press Command V. Again, we can just keep this as pixels, and we can roughly position this how we'd want it to be. So I can move this up to the torso, and sometimes this needs a little bit of back and forth to get it scaled and positioned right. I'm just going to press Enter to place this, and now I need to save this PSB file, so Command S. Let's jump back to our mockup, and you can see this is automatically being applied to the t-shirt. It's got some subtle texture applied to it as well, and a little bit of warping to match the look of the t-shirt. So this is a nice way to see how your design might look. I can go back in here and I might just move this up a touch as well. Let's press Command Save again, go back to the t-shirt design, and there it is. What we can also do is go back to our layers panel, and you'll see there's a layer here that says t-shirt color. If I double click on the color tile here, we can actually change the color of the t-shirt to something else, so we can see how this would look on different colors as well. So nice and easy to do. If I click OK, that's it, ready to go. And this can just be a good step to take just to see how your designs are working on an actual image of a t-shirt. It's a little bit easier to envisage how they're going to work, potentially where you need to make changes in your design as well. So here we are on Redbubble, and this is just the last thing we're going to look at, and this is just an example of actually uploading your artwork and seeing how it can be applied to a t-shirt. So I'm just going to click on Upload New Work. I've created an export of our badge design that we did, so I'm going to click Open. That's going to upload, and you can see down here they've got all their different products, and you can see how it's going to look on them. Now obviously we've sized this nice and big on that template, so it's going to look completely different on different products. What we could do is go to large print clothing, for example. Let's click Edit, and as I was saying, we've got the ability to resize and position this. So I could scale this right down, for example, and we might want to position this in the top right of the t-shirt as a small badge logo, and it's super easy to do that. I can just click Apply Changes, and that one's good to go. But that's really it for our overview of our t-shirt design process. Like I say, if you have any questions or want more information on any part of this process, then let us know in the comments down below, and we'll be sure to make more videos on this topic. Okay guys, I'll see you in the next one. If you want to learn more about graphic design, we've put together a free 1-hour training where you'll discover the top 5 secrets of successful designers, which saves you the hassle of trying to figure it all out for yourself. We'll be showing you how to immerse yourself in the sector you're designing for, creative thinking and how to spark creativity, what good composition is and how you can achieve it in your designs, how to pick the right colours for your designs, and how to pick the right typefaces for your project. So if you're serious about leveling up as a graphic designer, then make sure to sign up for the next free webinar. Space is limited and these events always fill up fast because they're significantly better than the information others charge you for, and ours is free. The link's in the description, you're not going to want to miss it, I'll see you there.